auziți și ne vedeți? Bun. După cum probabil ați văzut și în promovarea webinarului, astăzi avem alături de noi pe Sara. Sara este la ora actuală în Cehia, dar a trăit foarte mult timp în Irlanda și din acest motiv vom face webinarul de astăzi în limba engleză. Așa că acum voi schimba în limba engleză și sper că este în regulă pentru toți cei care sunt deja prezenți la webinar. Hello, first of all, welcome Sarah. Thank you for joining us for this webinar for the Romanian market.
Salut, and thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. Before we go into the full topic of the webinar, which I believe it's a very nice and it's actually a topic that is very dear to my heart, how to expand abroad, the key to international success for Romanian companies, because I would really like to see Romanian companies succeeding in foreign markets. In Romania, we have a lot of companies from abroad that are succeeding in Romania. So I would love to see more companies from Romania succeeding in foreign markets. Before we dwell into this topic, I just want to make some technical announcements, let's say. So first of all, for all of you that are watching this webinar on YouTube, I kindly invite you to join us in Click Meeting. My colleagues are going to put a link in the YouTube comments for the Click Meeting. The reason why we want to have you in Click Meeting is because we can be more interactive in here. We can ask questions and you can answer them, and there is a faster connection between us and the audience. So we kindly ask you, if you're watching us on YouTube, please join us in Click Meeting. Now, the second very important announcement is in regards to the recording of this webinar. If you want to receive the recording of the webinar, in case you want to go over the materials again, in case you are not able to be here for the whole webinar, we need your consent. So when you register for the sign up, you had to click 3 boxes. If you didn't click all 3 boxes, probably you missed the one that gives us the consent to send you the recording, because it's a separate consent for that. So my colleague has just posted into the chat the link to the form where you have to give us the consent so we can send you the recording. Sorry about having to give extra consent, but you can blame the European Union and the GDPR policies for this. As we also posted into our social media, we have prepared some extra benefits for those of you that will stay with us until the end. So we invite you to stay with us until the end of the webinar, as Sarah has prepared something extra for the participants. For those of you that haven't been before to a WhitePress webinar, I am Darius. I am the head of business development for Central and East of Europe in WhitePress. And at WhitePress, we are an international content marketing platform and SEO platform that we specialize in publishing your content in over 100,000 websites globally. So as I already mentioned, I am just the host. So that was all with me talking. From now on, I'm going to give the mic to Sarah. Sarah is the head of SEO in WhitePress. And before this, she worked a lot in the SEO industry, and she will tell you more about herself. Sarah, once again, thank you for joining us, and you have the floor.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. Right. Let's see if we can get this presentation. Okay. Can everybody see?
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Amazing. So let's get started. So, as maybe not all of you know me, numele meu este Sara. And that's all the Romanian I'm going to speak, because I'll look like an idiot if I say anything else. I'm the SEO manager here at WhitePress. I'm actually a psychologist by trade, studied psychology in Dublin, and then did my master's in digital marketing. I've been working in this industry for 12 years. That makes me feel old. I worked actually as a university lecturer in France for teaching master's students digital marketing and international SEO and international business. And I used to run my own business as well, helping companies expand abroad, and was named Business Personality of the Year in Northern Ireland. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I'm not going to bore you with anything else, and we can go straight in. Darius, should we ask everybody, where do people want to expand to?
So in order to get a better understanding of who the audience is for today, we have prepared 2 questions. One of them is, where do you guys want to expand? So I put a question on the screen for you, and everybody can vote which regions are you interested in expanding to.
While people are voting, I can see I got a question from Delia. It was 2019. So yeah, 6 years ago.
Okay, so we are getting some votes in. I'm going to leave the poll up for a few more seconds, so everybody has a chance to vote. So far, as expected, the focus is DACH, so Austria, Germany, Switzerland, followed in closely by West, so Spain, Italy, France, Netherlands, Belgium. Yeah, so thank you for those of you that voted. I will also quickly share the results here so everybody can see them. So as I mentioned, most of the people are interested in the DACH region, and the second it's West, Spain, and Italy, France. Thank you all for voting. Sarah, you can go back to the
presentation now. Amazing. So that's good. At the end of the webinar, there's going to be tips for individual countries, so I can see that at least I have chosen some relevant countries. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. But we're going to look at kind of international expansion 101, localization, expanding digitally, and tips for individual countries. Now, all of these topics you can go really in depth with, but because we only have an hour, I'm just going to skim the surface. But if anybody does have any questions or any follow-up, questions, you can reach out to any of us afterwards, or you can put your questions in the chat. Like, the more interactive you guys are, the better for me. So let's get started with international expansion 101. It's probably a bit obvious why companies want to expand internationally, especially if you're based in the CE region, a bit like me in the Czech Republic. And I think Romania, you guys have a pretty similar situation as well from what I've learned from my research. But expanding abroad, it allows you to diverse your revenue streams. Of course, you get access to larger markets as well. So like you get access to the DACH region, like you said, the West, US, UK, which have a lot more potential money-wise and buyer power-wise than, say, home markets. One other thing that a lot of people forget as well is talent acquisition. So by expanding abroad, you actually get to get a bigger pool of talent as well. Qualified people from different countries, access to things like native speakers in different countries as well. And also it gives you a competitive advantage against your competitors if they're only trading domestically and you are going international as well. So I hear a lot of businesses that I've personally worked with often just decide that they want to expand abroad. They kind of say, oh my gosh, I want to work in Germany. I want to do that. Let's just make it happen. But in the background, you need to do a little bit of planning, and you need to make sure that, you're prepared for going international, and if now's the right time. When is the right time to expand? So one thing that I always say as well is you need to have stable domestic operations. If you don't have your operations in Romania sorted, or okay, then expanding abroad is going to be a bit of a disaster. You need to be able to cope with your home market first, before you can go abroad, and you need to make sure that you have the cash flow to go abroad as well, because again, it's not cheap, and if you try and do it on the cheap, then it's not going to work very well. You need to make sure as well that you have product market fit. So I have seen quite a few companies that, for example, wanted to expand from Ireland to the Czech Republic. One example that I always give is of a pest company. So they wanted to sell solutions for foxes and stopping foxes going in people's gardens or going in people's bins and stuff. In Ireland, foxes are everywhere. You can see them walking down the street in the middle of the day in Dublin. They're pretty kind of like, I would say, domesticated almost. Whereas in the Czech Republic, foxes very much live in the forest. You don't have a problem with them. Like, the main pests that we get are moles. So most people are trying to fix moles or weasels and stuff like that, which you don't have in Dublin. This company didn't do their research, so they went full out with this plan of, saving the Czech Republic from foxes. Unfortunately, they failed, because, again, they didn't do their research. They didn't realize that, different markets have very different needs and products fit very differently. And this can be like another one as well. Tesco's. So a big company, you'd think that they would do their research. However, they kind of failed in the Czech Republic because their pillowcases and their bedding wasn't the right size. So in Ireland, we have little small pillows and double duvets, whereas in the Czech Republic, people tend to have single duvets, even if they're a couple, and these absolutely massive pillows. Unfortunately, people are not going to buy new bedding or weird size bedding just so that they can fit the sheets. So again, Tesco ended up doing this massive sale of, unwanted bed sheets and stuff, and now they don't sell it anymore. So again, needs to fit. And you also need to make sure that you have the operational capacity as well, because if you can barely manage with your orders and everything at home, you're not going to be able to manage the extra capacity. And remember that you only have one chance to kind of make this a success. And if you piss everybody off when you go into the new country, you're not going to end well. So yeah, make sure that you're able to kind of wow people when they order with you first, and you can take on all the orders, otherwise they won't come back. So how do you actually choose the right market? So a lot of people, again, I've seen this before, that people think, okay, so Germans have money, we're going to expand into Germany and do it that way. It's quite a common problem here in the Czech Republic that people do that for, say, France, Germany, the US, the UK, and other Western markets. It's not quite as easy as just deciding that you want to go into that market, because each market has different needs, and different regulations and stuff like that. So you need to be smart and do your research with which country you choose. So you need to look at market attractiveness. So, is it going to be worth it for you? Is it going to be a good market? Is it a good cultural fit? A lot of people forget about culture. Like, culturally, do your companies, will it be okay? Basically, are you prepared for their regulations? Because again, different countries, different regulations. Sometimes, like, going into America is easier because you don't have the EU laws. We don't have the GDPR and stuff like that. But if you were doing it the other way around, a lot of American companies struggle with Europe because they're not used to dealing with the regulations that we have, and consumer laws and everything are a lot stricter. So you need to think about that. How easy is it going to be doing business there? Like, do you have a team that speaks the language? Have you done business there before? Do you have local representatives, stuff like that? Or is it going to be completely new? And also go for countries with higher margins as well, because at the end of the day, we're all here to make money. We're here to do business. So think about those margins as well. So once you've decided what market you're going to be doing, what entry strategies can you use? the easiest way of probably doing things is starting with exporting, because then if you have a kind of premises or a factory or something, it means you don't actually have to set up somewhere else. And I know that a big USP of, say, companies in our region is that, it's cheaper for us to have factories in Romania and the Czech Republic and Poland than it is to open them up in, say, the US or Germany or somewhere like that. So if you can kind of do that model, export into the different countries, that's quite a popular way of testing the waters, and the investment isn't so big. Some things people do as well is that they set up partnerships with local companies, and that way you can make most of their resources, and you don't have to worry too much, again, about opening everything from scratch. You can look into franchising or licensing in the different countries. You can look into direct investment, so like actually opening up premises in the country and stuff like that. But again, it's pricey. And then you also have as well digital expansion. So if you have an e-commerce store or something like that, you can expand digitally, which works quite nicely as well. One thing you also need to consider is cultural and legal considerations. So we're going to be talking about localization in a bit, but you need to make sure that you're localizing your offerings so that you don't actually have a repeat of like the pest disaster with the foxes or the bed sheets at Tesco's and stuff like that. As marketers, we're all trained that we need to feel local. People buy from locals. So if you're expanding into a different country, you need to, give the impression that you are local, rather than some foreign country, and that's more important in some countries than it is in others. You need to understand the legal obligations as well, so hire a good lawyer in that country just to make sure you're not getting into trouble, and also comply with market standards as well. So again, if you're expanding into the US, it's going to be very different to if you're expanding it in the EU. And as Romania is in the EU, it's going to be a little bit easier to, expand into EU countries because you're already used to the regulations, you know what you need to do. And you've got that advantage there as well. You need to build the right team too, because you can't do anything if you are not, if you don't have the people to do it. Lots of companies, when they expand, they kind of do a mix of local talent and people who have experience in the companies, and that works quite well. Hiring local talent is really important because, again, they have the cultural insights that you need. They have the same style of customer service that you need, and stuff like that. Make sure that you appoint country managers or use hiring consultants and stuff like that, because each country has, again, different regulations, different hiring norms, different ways of, working with people. So you need to be used to that as well. And you also need to invest in cross-cultural communication training for your employees and also for the new employees in the different countries, because having worked for global businesses, there have been so many times that arguments have arisen over, maybe one country, for example, like the Netherlands, being more direct, and then people in the UK kind of say getting offended because of the communication style and stuff like that. Whereas if you're kind of on the same level culturally, then it will help reduce conflict. Finance and funding. So where are you going to get the money to actually do this? Because expanding internationally actually costs. So what you need to do is make sure that you budget and have a strict budget and stick to it for entry costs, local hiring, legal fees, marketing, and unexpected delays, because there are always going to be delays. Maybe you don't get planning permission, maybe your business doesn't open on time, maybe something like that. Luckily, in the EU as well, I think it's probably the same in Romania, but they have it in the Czech Republic, where you can get funding from the EU to expand abroad because they're trying to boost economies in our region. So that's a really good way of looking into things and getting grants and stuff. And you also need to be aware of like currency risk management as well. So if you're doing business in euros, if you're doing business in different country currencies in Czech crowns or whatever, because if the exchange rate flops, you're going to have issues with that. Right, before I move on to the next section about localization, does anybody have any questions at all? Nope, everybody's quiet, so I'll take that as no news is good news. And we'll move on to localization. So, what is localization? You guys have probably heard of translation, you've heard of interpreting, maybe you've heard of localization as well. But basically, localization is a fancy word for translation. And it's the process of adapting your products, content, communication, and everything for the cultural and language side of your new target market. I'll be honest with you, like I worked in the translation industry for like nearly 10 years, and all of these different words kind of confuse people a lot because like all good marketing translations should be localized and stuff like that. But again, just make sure that you adapt whatever you do to the target market. Localization is really important. I know it can be really tempting just to, translate something, use ChatGPT, use a basic translation rather than localization. I get it. It costs money. But localization increases trust. If people go on your website and see that, the language isn't native, they're not going to trust you. They're not going to buy from you. That's especially true in English speaking markets in Germany and German speaking markets as well. So you have to be really careful with that. You also can't rely on everybody to do business in Romanian or English. So again, I've seen people try and expand into the Nordics and just be like, well, they speak English. They're not going to do that. People prefer searching in their own language. People prefer buying in their own language. And if you don't speak it, then you're screwed, basically. And also localization. I have seen so many horror stories where people have invested money in new websites. They've translated their websites into Chinese, for example, and it's not even indexed on Baidu, or they don't have any search visibility on it. SEO costs money, but it's definitely worth doing it. Otherwise, when you translate your website, you're not doing SEO. Nobody's going to find you and you're not going to get sales through there. So spending extra money, it's definitely worth it. You've got a localization checklist here. So again, before you start localizing, do things like content audits, look into glossary and tone of voice, technical setup as well, and legal and compliance situations as well. Right, and now the juicy stuff. So as I mentioned, I've worked in localization for quite a while. There are some things that you should probably know. So when it comes to localization and stuff, salespeople are quite strict. Well, I wouldn't say strict, they're quite intense. So they'll tell you need to translate the whole of your website. You don't. Only translate the pages which are worth it for the target market. Make sure that you're using data to inform that. So like keyword research in, for example, German or the different markets and stuff. Be very careful. Make sure that you're ordering localization and you're not ordering standard translation, because a lot of salespeople will try to sell you standard translation because it's cheaper. They get the sale, but it's just going to be a one-on-one direct translation and it reads shit, basically. What you need to do as well is also be careful, because a lot of companies actually sell machine translation, so like ChatGPT and something like that, or AI, Google Translate, whatever, and pass it off as human translation. So you need to be really, really, really careful that is actually human translation. And the other thing as well, when you order SEO services from translation agencies, they don't actually understand SEO at all. They think that, we'll just translate some keywords and put them into a translation, which is really not the way to go. So if you are going the localization route, work with a company that knows international marketing. At WhitePress, we do this all the time, but you can use any other kind of international digital marketing agency as well. Just make sure that you use them, because, yeah, Not going to be great if you mess up your localization. Any questions on localization at all before we move on to the expanding digitally bit?
We will wait to see if somebody writes in the chat. But in the meantime, I have one question. Are there some tools that you can use in the localization process? Like you said, for example, you were mentioning earlier to verify if the content is written by a human but not by AI, or as for example, I give it to a localization company but I don't speak the language. Is there a way for me to double check the work of the localization company that I chose, or any advice on this?
Honestly, the easiest way to do it is find somebody who speaks the language and get them to read through it, and check with potential clients and stuff like that. Because they'll be able to tell you, yeah, this reads good, or no, this reads bad. So I just, invest in somebody neutral. Don't get the translation agency to get a third party to check it because they're biased and they'll just be like, yeah, we're great, we're amazing. And also, if you email them back and you're not happy with it, yeah, if you basically tell them that it reads like Google Translate, they'll get really defensive and stuff like that, even if it does read like Google Translate. So just, make sure that you're careful and you use people who are good at marketing to do your translations.
Okay. Great. Thank you for the answer to my question and also for the insightful information so far. I don't see any question on the chat, so I think we can proceed.
Amazing. Right. So expanding digitally. So international SEO. So we have touched on this really briefly, and I've had my little rant about translation agencies covering international SEO. Sorry if there's any translation agencies listening to this. Hopefully you're not offended. But yeah, when it comes to international SEO, people put a lot of money and effort into their local marketing. So, for example, their Romanian strategies or their English strategies for their home market. You need to do that for each market. So it's always better to invest in, say, one market at a time, do a proper strategy and stuff like that, rather than going the cheap translation route, because otherwise that doesn't work and you just waste your money and you won't get conversions in the long run. You need to think about international search engines because not everybody uses Google. Again, if you're expanding into Korea or somewhere, then you'll need to look into Naver. In China, you need to look into Baidu. In Russia, Yandex. Even in the Czech Republic, we have our own search engine, Seznam. So again, think about them. When it comes to keywords, don't translate them. You need to adapt them and you need to do research in the actual language that you're doing. So, for example, when people are adapting their keywords from English into Czech, I always tell them, be prepared to have lots of keywords like cheap something, cheap shoes, cheap apples, cheap whatever. That's because the way people search is very different in different countries. Like English speakers search really quickly, German speakers use lots of long tail keywords and stuff like that. So you need to adapt. Don't translate everything. Use data to guide you. So there may be some pages that are just completely irrelevant and not worth being localized. It's okay. You don't have to translate everything. Sometimes it's better just writing local SEO content for local keywords and doing things that way. And also when it comes to technical setup of the website as well, make sure that you're following international SEO best practices as well, so that your website can be found and everything works on it. Social media. So when it comes to social media, again, you need to go where your audience are, and in different countries, so it's going to be different. In Ireland, for some reason, we love Snapchat. It's not big over here. But if you want to do business there, you need to do it. Even if you're B2B, don't ignore things like TikTok or Instagram or whatever. They can be relevant, and if your audience are there, you need to be there. when you are dealing internationally, you need to look at international platforms. So, for example, in China, you've got WeChat or Xiaohongshu, for example. So, again, make sure you're doing the local thing. And when it comes to social media as well, rather than using the same competitors that you have in Romania, you're going to have local competitors, and they're going to be completely different, maybe, to what you thought. Same goes for SEO. So make sure that you find those local competitors as well. With PPC, again, segment your ads by country and language. It sounds really obvious, but you'll be surprised the amount of people that don't do that. Make sure that you localize the ads. A lot of people just translate the ads from one language to another, but then it doesn't contain the keywords. You know, they're doing ads that are relevant for products in the certain markets as well. So again, it's always easier to write your PPC ads from scratch rather than just translating them. Make sure that you localize your landing pages as well, and don't send, Romanian ads to an English English ads to a Romanian landing page or something like that. And also use SEO to help you as well, because the better you have SEO in the target market, the cheaper your PPC is going to be. So again, get them to work together. Content. So you're going to need an individual strategy for each market. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but it will pay off a lot. I've said this a million times, but localize, make sure that you're not just translating. Write for each market, because each market has different needs. Don't translate everything, and also find local influencers to work with, so you can get them to write, guest blog posts. You can get them to do interviews. You can get them to help on social media and stuff like that, because the more local you feel, the more successful you are going to be as well. We've got measuring. So again, we're all marketers here. It sounds kind of obvious, but one thing you need to do is make sure that you set realistic KPIs. A lot of people, when they're expanding into smaller markets, they kind of use the same KPIs as they do, say, for like the US or the UK. And then they try and do that, say, for the Czech Republic, which has only a tiny population. There's no way that we can use the same KPIs, especially with market market maturity, number of population, the number of people searching for products. So make sure that you're realistic as well. And that's the same for things like search volumes. So like if you were to ever doing a campaign in Arabic, having a search volume of 10 is actually really good, because the tools aren't set up very well for dealing with Arabic. Whereas in the US, you might only want keywords above 1,000. You need to use tools for measuring that are international as well. Again, for example, if you are expanding into China, you need a tool that actually measures Baidu and not Google in China, because that would be completely pointless. And then as well, use Google Analytics, Google Search Console, country-specific tools and everything, and just make sure that you're using your data to guide you, especially when it comes to like your digital marketing in different countries and stuff like that. Any questions before we move on to the last bit?
We have a question. I will put it on the screen because it's quite a long one.
Okay, so the presentation was very informative regarding products, but what about services? Honestly, with services, it's exactly the same. The whole thing like localization, you need to localize your services. You need to make sure that you're writing in the local language for your services, stuff like that. B2B, again, all of these points I've actually used on both B2C and B2B. So it's kind of similar, just when it's services, again, I think kind of localization is probably going to be more important. You're not going to need to worry about e-shops or things like that, but the marketing tactics that you use at home for B2B, again, you're going to have to do them in a different language or in a different country. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And I have one more question.
Yep.
You mentioned in the beginning of the webinar that you were working quite a lot of international projects, and I would like to ask you, what were your go-to tools If you can name a few tools that you were using, let's say on a weekly basis when you were working with international projects, SEO tools, content tools, whatever.
Okay, so SEO tools, I was using Dragonmetrics because that's the one that does all of the different international search engines, and I found works a bit better than some of the other tools. Like content-wise and stuff like that, again, it depends on the market because some tools work really well, especially if you're using things like AI writers to help you and stuff like that. I find that, for example, in Czech, ChatGPT is actually the best one to use, but you need to give it a bit more information, a bit more context. So again, it's really is just experimenting, asking local people, seeing which one works best for you. What other things did I use? Tool wise, again, typical technical SEO stuff like Sitebulb, things like that, Google Analytics, Google Search Console, Screaming Frog, all of your typical tools that you use for content as well, HubSpot, so on.
Great, thank you. Actually, you named two which are not popular in Romania. Dragonmetrics, never came across it so far, and the same Sitebulb is not that popular.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
So there you go. You've got two new tools to try. Which one did you mainly
Definitely.
use in Romania?
So I know because in Romania a lot of people are using Ahrefs, they are using Screaming Frog, they are using Moz, and then
You guys use Moz. Interesting.
yeah, and of course ChatGPT. I was actually reading a statistic that it was the most downloaded app this year so far in Romania.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, in the Czech Republic, it's similar because most people use Ahrefs or Screaming Frog rather than the other two. So yeah,
Great. Thank you for the insights.
Mm?
So,
No.
let's see. I'm curious about the tips for individual countries and what countries you have selected.
Okay, so hopefully you guys are going to be happy because we've got Germany and we've got the DACH region. So let's start with that. Whenever I've dealt with Germany and the DACH region, I think one thing that you need to let go of is the stereotype that they're very modern markets. They're actually not. And when it comes to marketing, they're very, very traditional. So things like post marketing, sending oh my gosh, leaflets in the post and stuff is still very popular. Germans are really, really, really high on security and privacy. So they take cookie notices really, really seriously. And if you don't have the option to say deny the cookies with one click, it will actually, go off your website and stop dealing with you. So they kind of, take no hostages with that kind of thing. When it comes to, as well, Germany, it's very big on trust. So they need to trust you. You need to appear like a local company. You need to have really good customer service because people will phone you. They need to be able to do that in German as well. And when it comes to payment options and stuff like that, people actually buy from big e-shops via invoice, which is something that you'd never dream of in the Czech Republic or in Ireland or anywhere. But in Germany, they have it. So you need to have localized payment options if you're selling stuff online or even with your services as well. When it comes to, the DACH region as a whole, a lot of feedback that I've got is that Austria and Switzerland often feel kind of a bit neglected because a lot of websites say that they cater to Germany, but none of them are very clear about, can we post to Austria? Can we provide to Switzerland? So make sure that you're checking that as well and making that clear and specific. And language is another thing. So depending on if you're like B2C, B2B, and so on, you need to be careful of the differences between, for example, like Swiss German, Austrian German, and German German, because there are going to be different words for different things. Like, for example, if you're a hotel and you're ordering breakfast, like each three, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland have different words for breakfast. for example. So yeah, be a bit careful with that, and decide kind of which area you want to go in before you decide to localize. But if you do decide to localize for, say, Swiss German, they'll love you straight away, because they'll feel like you're really local and you know what you're doing. Any kind of questions on that before I go on to the next market? Because we've got quite a few to cover.
You were mentioning that it's good to localize for each of the German, but what would be your advice? If you're one company from Romania that decides to enter, let's say, the German speaking markets, but you don't have the capabilities to start localizing for all three of them, what would be the best approach in this scenario, or how would you put it?
I'd go for standard German, just normal German rather than the regional dialects, because the German that people in Switzerland and Austria learn in schools is the same as standard German that Germans learn in school as well. So
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
no worries. So next we have the Czech Republic. So these are going to be quite useful for the people who said that they wanted to expand in the region, because Slovakia is a similar market. I think, Poland's a little bit different, but again, a little bit similar. So with the Czech market, when it comes to things like SEO, it's not a very mature market. So luckily, you're not going to have much competition when it comes to expanding digitally, which is really good news for you guys. When it comes to as well, kind of mentality, Czech people absolutely love buying things that are in the sales. So if you want to expand, have a sale, sell things off for cheap. People actually don't stick to brands. They'll buy different brands. They'll just buy whatever's in the sale. And I always laugh because you can go to the supermarket and you see what's in the sale that week, because people will have a trolley full of, say, like 10 packets of, or like 50 packets of eggs, which they're just going to throw away, but because it's in the sale, they buy it.
Sounds very much like Romania.
Okay, so you guys get it. So
Yeah,
it
there
should
was
be
actually in March, I was at a presentation and the lady from Google was there, and she was saying that, like, especially on this topic of keywords, and all the things were searched the same in Romania with ieftin, which means cheap.
yeah.
So everything that we started was like phone, cheap.
Oh yeah, no, it's
Washing
exactly
machine, cheap.
the
Yeah.
same in the Czech
So
Republic.
it is the most like searched volume keyword when it comes to e-commerce, is to include the word cheap in it. So
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
or a discount. So either this one, and I'm laughing the most when I go to Lidl and I see, because they know that we have this mentality. They put discount, and I am more careful, and I actually look at the value of the discount. And sometimes the discount it's 1 cent, but it's a discount, and people buy it.
Oh my gosh, it's the same. And I don't know if you have like the sale day every Thursday in Lidl's, but people get into fights and stuff, and you see the old ladies like queuing up with their trolleys to try and get everything. And I've actually seen mothers fight over little baby clothes and stuff like that. So it's quite funny. But yeah,
Dan was adding in the chat that the German market is impossible to reach as long as you are not a native German speaker.
this is why you hire a native German speaker to do that for you. Like, Romanian companies can expand into Germany. It is possible. Just hire that native German speaker for,
Or at least outsource it if you don't have the
Exactly.
resources to hire him fully. In WhitePress, we actually have native German speakers, so we can assist you with your projects in the DACH region.
Exactly.
And when you don't have the money to hire somebody fully, you can outsource it to a company like us that has full German speakers, native ones that can assist you.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of. I'm not going to spend more time on the Czech Republic because I feel like we're vibing over this. UK and Ireland. So I always feel a bit weird putting UK and Ireland in the same slide because they're two very separate markets. Unfortunately, most companies kind of lump them into one. I don't know if you have anything similar in Romania, but the Irish are not fond of the UK, and they do not like being labelled as part of the UK. So if you do that, you're going to offend people, and that's not a good idea. And so when you're expanding into so we can start with the UK. So when you're expanding into the UK, people do not like. I sound really weird, horrible, but yeah, people are not too open to foreigners and foreign businesses, especially after Brexit. Unfortunately, that's kind of got a bit worse. They want to buy British, like they have British flags like plastered over all of their products, and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it's impossible. You just need to work hard. And like in Germany, make sure that you have a British native speaker to help you, that your English is perfect. Like, don't even have US English, because that'll make them really angry. It has to be British English, and things like that. When it comes to marketing as well, people in the UK kind of get offended a lot more easy than Ireland. So in Ireland, we're quite out there. We can be a bit rude with our marketing. Whereas in the UK, you have to be very politically correct, and things like that. When it comes to the differences between UK and Ireland, we actually use different words for different things. Again, this is more B2C, but for example, if you were selling something for cupboards in UK, it's cupboards. In Ireland, we call it a press. Or trainers, we call them runners, they call them trainers. So again, need to have a look into the local ways that people say things, because a lot of our English is based off the Irish language as well. Again, as I've just mentioned, in Ireland, we kind of like pushing the boundaries with marketing, so we can we don't mind being a bit more offensive with some of the stuff that we say, or using a swear word in our marketing and stuff like that, whereas you can't do that. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. But again, in the UK, in Ireland, people are not so price focused as they are in the Czech Republic. So again, if you're doing good quality, sell that as well. And yeah, that's a very whistle-stop tour. And then you have the USA. So I thought I'd finish off with some tips for expanding into the USA. Again, make sure that you're careful with the differences between UK English and US English, because there are quite a lot of differences, and you do need to localize. You need your website in US English, because otherwise people think there's just weird spelling errors if you have it in British English, which is something that I've come across a lot. And it is a lot more than just, swapping out S's for Z's, and things like that. The US market, again, you need to make sure that it's very US focused. People are not very used to doing business worldwide. So again, if you did go for the US market, go for partnerships, make sure that you have people inside the US, again, native speakers or somebody who speaks really good English to help you out there. The US, people are very friendly in the US market, which is really good. But I find that, the cultural differences between, say, Slavic regions in the US is quite a lot, because they're very enthusiastic about things. So be prepared to be enthusiastic, and be prepared to adapt your sales strategy to be yeah, we're the best, and stuff like that, which is something that I personally can't do naturally. I have to really act to try and do it. But yeah, again, the potential in the US is pretty good. Be careful with regulations as well, because they're outside the EU, so they're going to be very different to what you're used to in Romania. But yeah, definitely worth looking at. So yeah, I actually think I am at the end of my presentation. So mulțumesc. Thank you very much for joining.
We thank you.
And
we thank you for the insights. We got a question in the meantime.
Yep.
So we can start with that one. And in the meantime, now it's time for you guys to ask your questions to Sarah, so you can put them in the chat. So the first question is, how important is it for international SEO to target keywords combinations with terms like forum, opinions, or reviews? Upstream customers journey stage.
Again, I think it depends. Like, you definitely want to, find out what people are saying about you. So researching forums, opinions, and reviews and stuff like that. And then in some countries, it's more important than others. For example, like in Japan, they absolutely love review comparisons and stuff like that. So you have to have them. Whereas in some other countries, they're not so big on them. So again, let keyword research guide you. Let the data guide you, but definitely, check out what people are saying about you in the markets, because you don't want people to be hating on you in a foreign market that you don't understand and not be able to fix it before it's too late.
One thing that I would like to add on this topic of maybe reviews is something that we experienced in WhitePress, is that exactly this: pay attention to what the local people are using when they make the research. For example, in US, if you're in the business to consumer, Yelp is a huge thing. Yeah. So people are looking on Yelp for restaurants, for service providers, for all those things. Also, for example, Trustpilot. So if you're a B2B service, especially if you're a tool or anything like that, people will check you on Trustpilot. And when we come from east of Europe, for example, we don't pay attention to those tools, and you might end up realizing you have a bad profile on Trustpilot. Yeah, it happened to us at WhitePress actually. That when we started going into the US market, we never paid attention to our Trustpilot profile, and it had like 3 point something. And then we realized, okay, we need to ask our clients for reviews on Trustpilot because other people are checking us out there. So in terms of this, pay attention also to where are the local people doing their research in the buying process and the trustworthiness verification stage, let's say. We have another question. Is there any list of companies like Termene or liste firme for DACH region? I couldn't find some similar. Personally, to tell you, Sarah, Termene, it's a tool where you can see all the companies from Romania, actually. So you buy access to a database of all the companies from Romania, and you have their contact details, like the official ones. I don't know personally of a specifically one, but I can ask my colleagues. Dan, maybe you can send an email to romania@whitepress.com with your question from your personal email, and we will check with our colleagues and try to give you an answer on this one. I know there are such tools for Hungary, for Czech Republic, for Slovenia, but I did not check for Germany. But we can look into it and give you a feedback.
In Germany, again, they're really, really into their privacy. So having like financial data and stuff is something that, they don't really like to give out. So that's why it's a little bit harder to get the list. But I'm sure that you can find data providers as well who would be willing to sell data on that kind of stuff. So again, we can check with our colleagues, but just be prepared that it's not going to be as easy as, say, some of the services that we have here to find things.
Okay. If you have other questions, feel free to write them in the chat. In the meantime, I would just like to remind you that if you want to receive the recording from this newsletter, you have to give us your consent if you haven't done that when you signed up for it. So my colleagues are going to put in the chat the link to the HubSpot form where you give us the consent in order to receive the recording. And for those of you that are still here with us, as I said, we have some surprises by the end. First of all, if you have enjoyed this webinar and you would like to learn more about SEO in general, about international SEO, as you know, at WhitePress, we are huge promoters of learning, and we have recently launched a new product. Actually, it's a free thing. It's called Videos on Demand from WhitePress. And with the videos on demand from WhitePress, you can get access to all our previous webinars and also to the recordings of our conferences. As you know, at WhitePress, we have organized a bunch of conferences, SEO conferences, and we are giving more than 24 lectures for free to anybody who signs up to WhitePress video on demand service. And as I mentioned, the surprise coming for Sarah is that if any of you is interested in a one-on-one conversation with Sarah regarding your international expansion, Sarah is willing to give out some consultations for free. So we are putting now on the screen a link to the landing page where you can sign up for these consultations. You will have to provide us with your details, and you will select the calendar slot, and then together with Sarah we are going to arrange it that we will meet. So feel free to jump on the landing page, schedule your consultation, and we will discuss exactly with you about the market, specific market that you're interested in, and your specific business. Yeah.
Is that the call to action for the link building roadmap?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the link building roadmap is actually the international expansion one with me. So
Yeah.
do feel free to sign up, and I'd love to speak to you guys.
So, Sarah, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the insight that you have shared with us. I want to thank everybody who was with us until the end. And as Sarah has pointed out in her presentation a couple of times, localization is very important. And at WhitePress, this is what we can help you with. This is how we expanded internationally. Actually, at WhitePress, we cover right now 32 different languages. And for all those languages, we have at least one native person. So we know the importance of this, and we are ready to support any Romanian company that wants to expand abroad with local expertise and with localizing their business into any markets. So feel free to reach out to us. You can write to our email address, romania@whitepress.com. You can connect me directly, Darius@whitepress.com, or we can connect on LinkedIn. And we are more than happy to assist you with any international expansion projects that you might have now or in the near future.
Amazing. Well, good luck, everybody. It will be amazing to see more Romanian companies and companies from our region in general expanding more. And yeah, hope to speak to you soon. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or anywhere if you have any questions.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.